Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. We have a special episode, bonus episode actually, for you today. There's lots of big news in the adventure travel world, and so I brought on a special guest who you've met before, the CEO of my affiliate Active Adventures, Wendy van Lieshout. And I've asked her to come back on the show to tell us about some big news that affects all of us that are into adventure travel. And also I wanted to get her insights on what's going on now in the travel industry now that we're about a year and a half into the COVID crisis. So with that, let's get started. Last summer, I had Wendy van Lieshout, CEO of Active Adventures, and Dan Austin, founder of Austin Adventures, which I might add are two of my favorite adventure travel tour companies. So again, last summer, I asked them to come on the show to offer their insights about adventure travel in the early months of COVID. We learned all about the crazy rebookings and procedural pivots these two great companies had to make so that they could keep their clients safe and comfortable making travel plans. With incredible teamwork, flexibility, and a customer-first attitude, these companies adapted to the ever-changing situation. During last summer's 2020 interview, getting a safe vaccine within a year was like the moonshot of the 60s, but thankfully, we did it. The COVID crisis made us all pause to reflect and try to figure out how to better mold our lives into what we wanted it to be. Companies also took the time to figure out what they would like to look like at the end of the COVID tunnel and how they could emerge stronger. I've always thought that Active Adventures and Austin Adventures were like two peas in a pod. Both offer really cool, curated, small group, all-inclusive adventure travel, but one's based in New Zealand and the other in the US. I promote both companies on my show because they deliver the experiences I encourage you to try, and I'm confident that you will return home thrilled with your guides and the companies I recommend. And I know that when you get back, you'll be anxious to plan your next big adventure. So last week, I was both surprised and delighted to get an email from Wendy and Dan announcing that these two great companies had decided to merge. In my eyes, this is a perfect marriage. I've asked Wendy to come back on the show to tell us about the merger, to tell us about the latest scoop on travel now that we have a vaccine, and what the new Delta variant means to us, and we'll hear her thoughts about the future. Welcome to the program, Wendy. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Kit. Lovely to speak with you again.
Yes, and congratulations on the merger. It's a natural fit. Why don't you give us the inside scoop?
Yes, it's quite interesting how these strange times have forced us to think about business and life in a different way. And as you mentioned in your intro there, Dan and I have worked together previously, even prior to COVID. And when things started to happen, we just had a discussion about how we could better together. And we were both very driven to be bigger, better, stronger at the back end of this. And that's when the conversation started.
Very cool. So as your clients, what does this mean for us? Or what's in it for us, Wendy?
Yeah, well, look, the big thing is, of course, that there's a much broader offering of product across the globe between the two brands. So we are operating as one company, one team, but with continuing on with the two different brands. So the Austin Adventures brand obviously is very, very strong in North America, Central America, Canada, and other parts of the globe, while the Active Adventures brand is more prevalent in New Zealand and then also in other global destinations like the Himalayas, also in Europe, South America. So the two coming together just represents a complementary breadth of product that we've not been able to offer before, which is fantastic.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. So according to your press release, now you're going to be going to over 100 destinations in all 7 continents?
Yes, that's right. That's right. As we figure things out, the two brands do operate in a slightly different way, with the Austin brand having more focus on family travel and perhaps a slightly softer version of the hiking and biking and multi-adventure type product, while the Active brand stands for just perhaps slightly more challenging hiking and biking and multi-day, multi-sport adventures. So I think that the best message for customers and our guests of the future is that we have something for everyone, which is a fantastic opportunity.
So let me dig a little deeper in that. So let's say I want to go to a destination that you both currently go to. Does that mean that we have an opportunity to be a little bit more hardcore or tone it down a little bit depending on what we feel like doing?
Yes, that's exactly right. So customer service and sales teams have already been trained in both types of products. So when you're speaking with us on the phone or via email, we'll be able to point you in the right direction of the right type of adventure for you, depending on what you're looking for. And that can depend on the type of people that you want to travel with. And it can also depend on how full on adventurous or active the trips can be. I mean, both brands have always operated and will continue to be very bespoke depending on what the customer needs. So even within any given departure, there'll always be room for more active or less active, but there's definitely an element of a higher level of activity on the active branded departures than on the Austin one. So it just represents more opportunity.
That's cool. And also, I'm guessing because you do have a little bit of overlap in some of the bucket list places, does that mean that we have more date opportunities or more choices as far as when we can go?
Yes, exactly the same thing again. So at this point, there is no change it's not like one is merging into the other. Both brands will continue to operate separately, just with a coming together of the sales and marketing function and everything behind the scenes. But as far as the guest is concerned, there were 20 departures to Europe previously from Active and 50 from the Austin brand. Those will both continue on because they will suit different people.
Definitely. Do we go to one website or two websites, or how does that work?
Well, it actually really doesn't matter because both websites now feature each other's product. So I think how it will realistically work is if you're a dedicated Austin customer, that's where you will go, and you will now just find there's a few more products available on the Austin website, and exactly the same for Active. And that's the beauty of bringing the teams together behind the scenes, is that we can just make that available for our guests. And of course, you will know this, and you've mentioned it already. There's so many similarities. You mentioned two peas in a pod. We used to jokingly say that it was like a parallel universe because the way that we operate both brands is so incredibly similar, with such high standards, very bespoke service, very much putting the guests first, small groups, amazing guides that always comes through. And you will know that also, having traveled on our adventures, that the guides really make the trip, and that is absolutely consistent between both the brands.
Yeah, and that's actually the reason I have reached out, because I don't let tour companies come to me. I go to them. So I figure out the ones that I like, that I can say, hey, I like this, because it's my name when I recommend somebody. And there are two brands that I've felt very comfortable recommending to people. So I'm delighted that you guys have merged. And you're two different time zones too. So what does that mean for us?
Well, yes, and it's the little things that get us excited, Kit. But yes, we now have the ability to have a longer footprint as far as customer service and sales is concerned. So we can talk to our guests. It's not quite 24 hours a day, but it's certainly getting closer to that, based on the right through from the New Zealand time zone, and then we have people in mountain time, and we also have people on the East Coast. So just the lengthening of the ability to speak to our guests at a time that suits them is such a huge benefit.
Yeah, definitely. Just for perspective. So it's almost time for me to get ready for bed, and you're just coming into work.
That's right. You'll be surprised how many people really enjoy speaking with us in New Zealand, in the US, when it's their evening. Of course, that's the time when they may be home from work and they've had something to eat and they're relaxed and they're thinking about fun stuff, and that's when they want to talk to us, and that's when we're around.
Yep, that's perfect. Anything else we need to know about the merger? And then I'm going to shift focus and let's talk about what's going on now.
No, I think we've covered off just one team, two brands, and better than it's ever been.
So let's shift focus to the current state of COVID. We're recording this at the end of August 2021. The vaccine's been out for about 3/4 of a year, and many countries have high vaccination rates. So how has the vaccine changed things for travel?
Yes, well, we've certainly seen a significant uptick in demand across the board for both brands. The Austin domestic trips that have just coming to the end of the sort of summer season, the strongest bookings we've ever had in the 35-year history of the business. So there is definitely huge pent-up desire to travel domestically. Similarly, for the Active brand, since the vaccine has rolled out, there was a really strong uptick from about March onwards. And for instance, June was the highest ever sales month for Active in 25 years of history. So yes, the vaccination has made a significant difference in demand. From what I can see anecdotally, I don't even think that is yet the mainstream public that is ready to start traveling. That's mostly some quite confident outliers who are happy to travel regardless of what's going on, who feel very comfortable vaccinated. I think there'll be even more demand when levels of confidence rise again as vaccination rates go up.
I know it's been night and day. So last summer, I was on a road trip in the US and I had everything to myself. And then fast forward, I went out on the road again in March, just got off the road a couple of weeks ago. I could never get into a place. Everything was so crowded, all the state parks, the national parks. So I ended up boondocking most of the time. So it sounds like that's what you're experiencing too, that people are more comfortable initially doing the domestic. They feel that. And then are you starting to see the international bookings creep up a little bit, or are people still being hesitant, or where does that stand?
Yeah, again, that's been quite surprising. So particularly the Active brand and then also the Austin brand around Central America. So there definitely is, again, an uptick there in demand. So Active has been selling very strongly from the US through to Europe and also South America. So we've been operating trips with Active in the Galapagos since March. We've also been running trips in Peru. Iceland sold out pretty much this year and now is already looking good for next year. And France and Italy have been quite popular. I mean, we're obviously at the whim of of everything that's going on in the media and things as well, but you'd be very surprised how much demand there is. But one thing we have found, and on the back of your comment about things being full in the when you've been on the road, is I don't think there's ever been a better time to travel with a tour company as opposed to independently, because we have the space confirmed in the parks and we know how to navigate all the difficulties and the protocols of COVID. So the level of customer evaluations coming back, interestingly, is probably higher than we've ever seen, because I think people are just really appreciative of that guiding hand. So yeah, interesting times, Kit, for sure.
Well, that I experienced that firsthand in Zion National Park. In fact, if you listen to that show, your guys with the guides were able to zip right through to the trailheads, whereas I couldn't get a shuttle ticket. So I had to ride my bike. By the time I got there, the shuttle bus people beat me. It was a disaster. So I left after one day. I was like, I should have booked a tour. That was ridiculous. And it's particularly important when things are busy, because you do have access and you've got the scoop, you've got the permits, you've got all the things that you need that we traveling trying to figure it out ourselves don't necessarily have that access anymore.
Yeah, that's why I think more than ever now. And it's just knowing all those little tips and tricks and who you need to call when there's an issue
Right.
and even just as we were on the road during the season, we learned ways around things that just gave us the upper hand when everyone was trying to get to the same place.
And so it seemed like to me, Memorial Day, which is late May in the United States, it was like, all right, COVID's over. We're ready to rock and roll. And everybody's out and excited. Everything's going great. Happy days are here again. And then boom, a couple months later, in comes the Delta variant. How is that making you pivot or change, or how is that affecting everything now?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it that has had an impact. And we have seen a slowing down of bookings again. Having said that, and as a traveler, you'll relate to this, guests still want to have things to look forward to and they want to dream. So certainly bookings haven't stopped by any stretch of the imagination. I'm still every day when I see the bookings rolling in, I'm just amazed and heartened by the fact that we still have so many people who want to travel. But yes, I would say there's probably a 30%, 40% drop in sales since the Delta variant came around to us. But I also see that flicking back very quickly once again we have that strain under control.
Right. Well, and I think as I've seen the waves, I've been tracking different countries where it hit first, and it does the little bell curve, and then everything goes back to whatever the normal was for them. So I imagine that's going to happen with us as well. But how are you coping with all these ever-changing rules? You've got all these countries you're going to now, and they've got, I'm supposed to be going on your Dolomites trip in a couple of weeks, and every day I'm checking and things are changing. How are you dealing with all these? The EU now has to have the locator form, and how are you dealing with all these changes?
Well, I would be lying if I said it's been easy, Kit. It's just changed the way that we've done business. And now, even though it's not easy, it is becoming the norm. The beauty is of things like having run in Galapagos since March is that was a test case for us. We had to understand every sort of protocol and testing procedure there, and then it changed. So we're now sort of used to what needs to be done. And don't get me wrong, we are not the font of all knowledge, because obviously even while the trip is on the road, the protocols could be changing. So we do quite often refer people back to the particular country's regulations, but at least we know exactly where to send people to get that information right. And our suppliers, who in most cases we've been working with for decades, are so supportive of what's necessary and what needs to happen, that working as a team between us as the tour operator and them as the local people on the ground. Like I say, that's why we've been able to deliver these stunning trips despite everything that's going on, and also taking into account all the many different layers of protocol. But it isn't easy. I'm not going to lie and say that it's a walk in the park. But as always, we just try and make it as smooth as possible for our guests, because that's the value that we add as a tour operator.
And is the active assurance program still in place with the merger? And tell us about that.
Yes, it sure is. And yes, that has definitely been used quite a lot in the last 18 months. So active assurance means that at any time, if you need to make a change to your travel, up to 30 days out, you can make that change and not lose any funds. Your deposit, which is a $500 deposit, is worth a lifetime. So it just means that we move your deposit to a different trip, and you can have the assurance to know that you're not going to lose any money. The only time that hasn't worked is on the odd occasion where there's unrecoverable costs, where there might be something that's been purchased that isn't refundable. But generally speaking, that's given people the confidence to book with us and to stay and to be able to rebook onto something down the track. And it's also transferable to other people. So, if someone actually decides that they never want to travel again, but their family friend or neighbor or brother or sister wants to travel, then that deposit is transferable to them. So it's just the $500 commitment, and everything else can be moved.
That sounds more than fair. All right, so now you've got a new monkey wrench thrown at you this week. The EU is recommending that US citizens not be allowed in. Different countries are allowed to do whatever they want to do. If you're within that 30-day windows, now what happens if the country says, no, we don't want US citizens?
Yes, so we are monitoring that very closely, as you can imagine. At this point, it is only in relation to people who aren't vaccinated. So vaccinated travelers are still welcome, and no decisions have actually been made. But we are working with our suppliers already in Europe, so that if we do have affected guests, we can have a solution for them to move their travel. But at this point, US citizens traveling internationally tend to be mandated by the airlines to be vaccinated. So we expect that we won't have too many problems with this latest change.
Okay, I didn't realize that they had the vaccination clause in there. And I don't know about you, but it seems to me like we thought we'd beat it. I think COVID's here forever, just like the flu is here with us forever. And we're just gonna have to learn to live with it somehow. And look in your crystal ball, Wendy, and tell us what you see.
I see, and as you can imagine, I spent quite a bit of my spare time looking into this. There's a real pattern emerging that when the vaccination rate gets to the sort of mid-high 60s, early 70s, that's the tipping point where the cases may still be increasing, but the deaths drop significantly. So I think there'll be a real push globally to continue to push that vaccination rate up, which of course can be challenging, particularly with third world countries. But I agree with you that I think it will be with us forever in some shape or form. And what I think the next milestone will be, that will be a real game changer for travel, will be some version of a vaccination passport that's attached to your travel documentation, to your own personal passport. That to me feels like the next milestone to actually give people confidence. And I don't mean the travelers, it's more the people at the other end, the suppliers, the airlines, the accommodations, the movie theaters in some case. Once we have that identification somehow attached to the vaccination, I think we'll start to make things much, much easier. But I agree with you, it's not going anywhere in a hurry.
Yeah, well, I get a flu shot every year. I don't know why I just don't get a booster every year. But, I think that's what we're going to come to until it either peters out or becomes so mild it's like a cold over time. And speaking of the vaccine, all right, so when we go over right now in the US, we get little vaccine cards that are dated with the times that we got it. I think that's all we have to show to prove that, and then take the COVID test within 72 hours of flight. That's what's being accepted to go into restaurants and to do things. Is that all we need? And then this form that they're asking for?
No, I think from what we can tell from the countries that we're currently running trips in, that's exactly the protocols. If there is anything different when people are traveling with us, we will certainly make them aware. But that certainly seems to be the direction it's heading in.
Good. Well, it seems to me, even though, and I think we've had a little setback this last month, but I think we're going to go through that bell curve and things will settle down another month or so. And people need to have something to look forward to, as you mentioned earlier. I know I booked several trips with you next year. I can't wait to get down to Central and South America and explore those. And any words of advice for folks that are listening, that I know people are like, oh, I'm ready to go. And then, oops, maybe not. And what kind of advice can you give us?
Yeah, well, I am a firm believer in that you need something to look forward to. And despite the fact that things have been a little bit up and down with the different variants and things, if you're vaccinated and you feel confident about travel, please give us a call and we can talk you through what the best opportunities are. And that depends on every single person. You know, you may only be confident to go 100 miles down the road to your nearest national park, but let us help you with that and let you have a great time and explore it and feel like you're on a vacation. If you're feeling a little bit more intrepid, we have some great options in Baja and in Costa Rica that will make you feel like you're a million miles away and have a fantastic trip if that's your level of confidence. And then there's fairly further afield available as well with Europe and South America, which are definitely becoming popular as things reopen. So let us, put it on us to give you a hand to find out what suits you best, because we're in the business of making sure that our guests have a fantastic time, and that starts right from the first phone call.
And also too, with adventure travel, you're outdoors, so you're almost in a better situation anyway that way. But if somebody is unsure, Wendy, can they just call up and say, this is the experience I want to have? Can you guide them to a place that sounds like it would fit, or a trip or tour that sounds like it would be a good fit for them? Or do they have to say, I want to go to Costa Rica? Or tell us about that.
No, and because there is quite a high level of demand despite everything that's going on, and because we've had a sellout season in North America, that's exactly the conversations we're having. Because there's a much shorter booking window at the moment, people ring up and say, hey, I want to go this month. It's almost like something triggers in their minds that I feel good now, I'm ready to go. And the problem has been that we haven't necessarily got the particular destination available. But the beauty of that is that we've been able to discuss with guests some amazing different destinations that they may not have considered, but we will certainly always do our best to match them to exactly the experience that they're looking for, even if it's somewhere they may not have considered before.
That's cool. So just see what's available, particularly if people are thinking or planning more short term than they normally would have, and say, hey, what have you got? And then see what fits them within that time frame.
Exactly. And it's been remarkable how well that's been working and how people have been enjoying doing things a bit differently.
Yeah, I think that's actually pretty cool. Yeah, surprise me.
Yes.
Well, before I let you go, Wendy, what thoughts do you want to leave us with?
I would say that if you've traveled with Austin Adventures before, please go and have a look at what is now available in their product suite. And the same goes with Active Adventures. Come and have a look and see what's now available, because there is definitely more to choose from, which is really exciting. And if you have never traveled with Austin Adventures or Active Adventures, have a good listen to Kit, because she'll tell you how amazing the experience is. So hear it from you, not from us.
Well, you know, I'm a super fan.
We love what we do, but we know that you love what we do also.
There you go. No, I do. No, it's the trips are life changing. They're fabulous. So I appreciate your time, Wendy. Thanks for making time in what I'm sure is an extraordinarily busy week for you.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. It's always a pleasure to chat, and thanks for having me.
I really appreciate Wendy coming on the program today, particularly in a week that's probably as busy as any she's had in the last year and a half with all that's going on. So thank you, Wendy. And just a couple thoughts before we sign off today. this is a crazy time in travel, but we learned a lot of cool things today. Number one, with what are my favorite travel companies and my favorite adventure travel companies in the world, now we have this huge, broad spectrum of trips. So what was a group here, a group there, now we have the whole world, and we can pick and choose the challenge level. And we can also say, if we want to go with our families, there's family oriented trips, there's adult oriented trips. So I think that's pretty cool. And I'm also a big fan, as you know, of, I do a lot of solo travel, I do a lot of independent travel, but when it comes to adventure travel, I buy tours 90 some odd percent of the time, because it's expensive for me as a solo traveler to try to figure out the logistics. Who's going to pick me up at the back end of my trip? I got to somehow or another get back to my car. No, I don't want to do that. If I hire a tour, they figure out all that stuff. And now also with COVID, they got to figure out that stuff for me too. Or God forbid, something goes crazy, like we heard, I think it was Dan last year on the episode. He's like, they had to scramble to figure out how to get their people back in country. And I like that with uncertainty. It's not my problem, it's their problem. Like that very much. I also like too, as things are concentrated where people are traveling, that the tour companies, as I learned in Zion, they've got the permits, they've got the access. And so, unless you know the tips and tricks and have a way to get to places as they do, that it's not the greatest experience today, particularly in our national parks, unless you do go with a tour company. I have resolved or resigned myself to the fact that no more national parks without a tour. No way, because I couldn't, I go all the way to Zion and I can't do what I want to do because I can't get there, because they've limited the people, but they got the permits. So keep that in mind. And I think Wendy's probably right. We're probably going to be looking, whether you like it or not, agree with it or not, at a vaccine passport as the future of travel. So hopefully you have had the vaccine. If not, and you are capable of having the vaccine, I hope you'll seriously consider doing that, because I think that's the way the world's going to go. Whether we, like I said, whether we agree or not, politically agree or not, that's probably going to be the way things go down. And we just need to adapt to the new realities of the world with the pandemic, with the computers where they can track everything. So I don't think it's going to be the little white card I'm going to be showing next week. I think it's going to be part of my passport in the future. I'm no seer, but that's what I think is going to happen. I think the other important thing that came up in the interview today is that because things are uncertain, things were crazy, bad, then we thought things were great, and then we get the Delta and all that, that when you do plan your travels, book with people that are taking the hit. They've got the adaptable, cancelable, changeable programs like the Active Assurance program that Wendy talked about, where if all of a sudden you get nervous, or if all of a sudden we have another spike in whatever the lambda or whatever the next phase of this disease might be, or whatever, it could be something we don't even know about, it gives you the flexibility to alter your plans without a financial penalty. And so look for that when you purchase a tour, when you purchase lodging, whatever it is that you're doing. And I encourage you to get travel insurance regardless, even if it doesn't cover the COVID pandemic, because it's a known entity. Usually it'll cover if all of a sudden you get sick and you can't go. It just won't cover you if things are canceled because of COVID. So just make sure when you buy a policy, read the policy so you know exactly what you're buying and what you're covered for, and plan accordingly. I hope you've enjoyed this bonus episode of the Active Travel Adventures podcast. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on!
This meeting is being recorded.